Henry Reelbird was born on July 24th, 1948. He is a traditional Crow Indian, a cowboy, and Montana's third state poet laureate. Our heritage, our lives, and our way of life in this great state are often expressed through poetry, and the work of Henry Reelbird brings so much of Montana to life. Reelbird was raised by his grandparents ranching on the Crow Reservation in Montana, and entered the first grade speaking only the Crow Indian language, which as his primary language shapes his poetry. He competed as a saddle bronc rider during college, where in 1969 he dislocated his hip after being thrown and dragged by his foot. The injury began his transition out of the physical world of bronc riding into the spiritual world of writing. During this time, he read works from Longfellow, Tennyson, Thoreau, and Edgar Allan Poe, which inspired much of his writing. Reelbird remained on the pro radio circuit until 1980, when he finally hung up the saddle after years of continued pain. He eventually received his bachelor's in elementary education from Montana State University Bozeman and went on to receive a master's from MSU Billings. Reelbird has written 6 anthologies, 4 poetry collections, and 12 children's books, which he also illustrated. He is actively involved as a cowboy poet and recites work annually at the Cowboy Poetry Gathering in Elko, Nevada. The National Cowboy Hall of Fame granted him the Western Heritage Award for his poetry that reflects his fusion of cowboy, horsemanship, and Crow culture. In 2009, Governor Schweitzer of Montana appointed Reelbird as the third state poet laureate of Montana. In the summer of 2010, as the poet laureate, Reelbird traveled on horseback 415 miles to distribute books of poetry. And so I'm gone by the next day, and so I don't know what they think. I just want them to enjoy the thought and go for the ride into the feeling, whatever it is, he said on giving people his poetry. Reelbird is intimately involved in Crow youth education and preservation of Crow tradition, and as having taught reading to all the elementary grades, has deep knowledge of problems Indian children face in the public school system. He worked as curriculum coordinator for Project Head Start, language arts supervisor at St. Xavier Indian Mission, summer program planner for 4-H and youth programs on the Crow Reservation, and served as the president of Little Bighorn College located on the reservation. Reelbird has also served on the Montana Advisory Committee on Children and Youth and the Crow Central Education Commission. As the teacher orientation specialist for the Pacific Northwest Indian Program, he, along with Karen Stone and Joseph Coburn, developed the Indian Reading Series, which is a reading and language development program utilized across 12 Native American reservations across the Northwest. The series consists of a teaching manual and stories written by Reelbird in both Crow and English, some of which include Birds and People, Far Out, A Rodeo Horse, and Teepee, Sun, and Time. Reelbird actively fights for maintaining of the Crow language, which has largely disappeared in contemporary generations, as a way to preserve Crow tradition and culture. Now I'm raising bucking horses, riding, and dreaming, he said, referring to his current life on his South Central ranch near Garryowen, Montana. Since his appointment to Poet Laureate, he has published 2 poetry books, Horse Tracks and Wolf Teeth. As much as Reelbird's poetry contains inspiration from Crow culture, one would expect his poetry to comment on the contemporary Indian condition in America, the oppressive past, and the loss of Crow tradition. But his poetry solely draws from his deep spiritual connection and his joyous outlook on life. His poetry is based on a spiritual and physical duality and connection to his Crow tradition, the simplicity of his cowboy lifestyle, and the stark beauty of Montana. One poem that exemplifies Reelbird's inspiration from Crow culture and natural elements is Sound of Sun, where he uses one of Crow oral traditions to honor his loving relationship with his grandfather. He talks about how his grandfather would always say that you can hear the sound of the sun rising, and how it is intimately linked to his grandfather's wish that he would live a joyous and fulfilling life. Reelbird performed Sound of Sun at a public reading.
All right. Sound of Sun. I can always ride a beautiful pony and walk through the pines as the bell on the horse's nose band rings in the whisper of wind through trees. Rich fragrances carry love home like a bird carries horsehair to its nest. Words of love build a house of love. Let feeling go way out in the heart, flying love. I have asked that nothing clings to your heart as you go riding through life filled with happiness and joy. The beautiful feelings of your love led the sunrise of a purple-topped sky above an orange-pink spray of life in the sunrise. My grandfather once said, if you are lucky enough, someday you will hear the sound of the sun rising. Someday the sound of the sun rising is what I've asked for you to hear. May you see and use what is good in life as you go riding, filled with happiness and joy.
Steeped in ancestral wisdom, Reelbird's poetry uniquely invokes a connection and appreciation for the world, which he manifests in his easygoing and simple life. I've always been able to just wander around in life and enjoy myself, and not get stuck waiting around for retirement or anything else. I still follow the trail of the buffalo. I keep my Indianness alive and live in the world the way it is. I enjoy life, and I'm not worried about making it. I go with the wind.